Lesson 35, I will multiply two-digit multiples of 10 by two-digit numbers using the area model. So we're going to move away from division for a little bit and we're going to talk about multiplying. And we've already learned standard algorithm of multiplying a two-digit number times a one-digit number. Now we're going to talk about a two-digit number, like say for example, we were going to look at, well, this is lesson 35. So what if we looked at the number 35 and we're going to multiply it by a multiple of 10? So I might take 35 times 40 because 40 is a multiple of 10. Eventually this is going to lead into two full two-digit numbers. But today we're going to start with the multiple of 10 because it's just a little bit easier. Go ahead and write your name at the top, please. And you're going to notice that they have already drawn the area model for you here. Let's take a look at our directions. Our directions say, use an area model to represent the following expressions, then record the partial products and solve. So partial products just means that we are doing part of the multiplication and adding it together. That's what we're doing here. We're doing this part, and then we're doing this part of the product, and we're putting these two products together to find the answer. So remember, your multiple of 10 is going to go on the side because it's the single, and then we're going to take 22 and put it in expanded form. So I've got 20 times 20. So 2 times 2 is 4, and then I have a 10 and a 10, so I'm going to add two zeros. And then I have 20 times 2. 2 times 2 is still 4, but this is only one zero, so it is 40. So over here, it doesn't matter what order you do them in. I usually like to do the ones first. So I'm going to say 20 times 2, and then I'm going to say 20 times 20. So 20 times 2 was 40. 20 times 20 was 400. So our answer is 440. Okay, let's try number 2. All right, so again, I've got 50 times 41. So my multiple of 10 is going to go to over here where the width would be. And then for the length, I'm going to take 41 and write it in expanded form. 41. Why don't you try to go ahead and do the multiplication? Pause the video and try to do the multiplication and see if you can find the answer by yourself. Okay, so hopefully you said 4 times 5 is 20. And then you have two zeros. 0, 0, because 10 times 10 is 100. So this is 20 hundredths or 2,000. And then 50 times 1 is just 50. So over here I've got 50 times 1, 50 times 40. So I've got 50 and 2,000. When I add that together, I get 2,050. All right, let's try this one. See if you can try to go ahead and set the area model up all by yourself and try to multiply and see how you do. If you get stuck, you can always press play. All right, so over here we're going to put 60 because that's our multiple of 10, and then we're going to put 73. So 7 times 6 is 42. 10 and 10 makes 100. So I've got 42 hundredths. 3 times 6 is 18. And then I'm going to add my 0. So over here I've got 60 times 3. 60 times 70. 60 times 3 is 180. 60 times 70 was 4,200. When I add, I have 0, 8, 3, and 4. So I have 4,380. All right, so on the back, they're going to ask you this time to draw your own area model. So it's just a little bit tougher. If you get confused, you could always turn back and look at your problem set on the front. So why don't you try to see if you can draw your area model by yourself and then come back and check with me and see if you did it correctly. Okay, I'm going to use my tool here so it looks a little bit neater. When I try to draw with my pen, it gets a little messy. All right, so I'm going to divide this in half. All right, now let's go ahead and label this. All right, so I have a multiple of 10 is 80. I don't know how this pen got green and it's staying green, but I don't guess it's hurt anything. And then I've got 32. Now it says record the partial products vertically and solve. So we also have to do 32 times 80. Remember, your multiple of 10 should be on the bottom. All right, so now I've got 3 times 8, which is 24, and 10 times 10 is 100. So I've got 2,400 or 2,400, and then 80 times 2 is 160. So 80 times 2, we just solved that, that's 160, and then 80 times 30 is 2,400. Now we add both of these partial products together, and that gives me 0, 6, 5, and 2, 2,560. All right, so why don't you try number 5 by yourself and then come back and check. Hopefully you're starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with this. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so I have some room. All right, so here is my area model, and now I'm going to go ahead and label. Here's my multiple of 10, and then I've got 54. So I'm going to do 54. Oh, I better move this over a little bit. I won't have room to label. All right, so I've got 54 times 70. I put that way over here so that I could have room over here to label the partial products. All right, so 50 times 70 would be 3,500 because 5 times 7 is 35, and then I added my 2 zeros, and then 7 times 4 is 28, and add my 0. So I did 70 times 4, which was 280, and then I did 70 times 50, which was 3,500. When I add those together, I get 0,873, 3,780. All right, now let's take a look at the next one. Visualize the area model and solve the following numbers numerically. So they're saying you don't have to draw the area model. It's okay if you do draw the area model, but eventually we're not going to use the area. We're just going to use standard algorithm. So we're going to try to do it without the area model this time. So go through the first one with me. I think you're going to find that this is much easier than you think. So we've got 68 times 30. Remember, the multiple of 10 has to go on the bottom. If you don't do that, it's going to be very confusing. So remember, we're doing 30 times 8 and 30 times 60. So I've got 30 times 8. I got to write small because I can already see I wrote this too big. 30 times 60. So 3 times 8 is 24, and then I add my 0 to make it a 10, and then I've got 3 times 6 is 18, and I've got 2 zeros here. It's really important that you line these up so that when you go to add, you're not going to make a mistake. All right, so I'm going to write this really small. 0, 4, and then this is a 10, and then this will be 2. So my answer is 2,040. Okay, not so bad. All right, let's try this one. 34 times 60. Okay, so that is 60 times 4 and 60 times 30. Why don't you see if you can finish this by yourself and then come back and check. All right, so 60 times 4 is 240. 60 times 30 is 1,800. Now we're going to add 0, 4, 10, and we get 2,040. Same answer as we got for the other one, just different numbers. All right, so let's scroll down a little bit here so that we have some room to do the bottom. All right, so now we're going to do 55 times 40. Just remember when you're setting up your problem that you're always putting the multiple of 10 on the bottom. So 55 times 40. All right, so now I've got 40 times 5 and 40 times 50. All right, so 40 times 5 is 200, and 40 times 50 is 2,000. So when I add those together, I get 2,200. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Ms. Jeans, why can't I just put down the 0 and then use standard algorithm? The reason why we're using partial products is because remember, very soon we're going to be doing problems like this. And standard algorithm is going to look much different when you multiply a 2-digit number than it does when you just multiply a 1-digit number. That's why I'm teaching you the partial products now, because this is going to lead right into multiplying these 2-digit numbers. So please go ahead and bear with me and do this, even though you think to yourself there's a faster way to do this, and I totally agree. But whenever we are getting ready to do this, there isn't a fast way to do it. We have to do it right. So that's why I'm showing you how to do partial products. All right, so now we're going to do our last one. Why don't you try to do this one all by yourself and then come back and check with me. So pause the video and try to do it all by yourself. Okay, so we do 80 times 5 and 80 times 50. So 80 times 5 is 400 because 8 times 5 is 40, and I add my 0. 8 times 5 is still 40, but this time I have to add 2 zeros. And when I add that together, I get 4,400. Okay, so if you get confused on partial products, remember to come back and take a look, and you can always still draw the area model if you need to, but if you can do it without the area model, I think you'll find that this is much more efficient. It'll go much faster, and you're less likely to make a mistake.